So, we're going to be going through a few different things today. We're wanting to be going over different laws, the grey zones, the positives, but we're also wanting to talk about different scenarios, different struggles, and different areas that people struggle with, and how you can get more support and how to deal with it, especially when it comes to being in very, very hard situations where our nervous system gets triggered, where we go into that freeze, fight, or flight mode. But we're going to go straight into it and we're going to start to talk about the laws around the women's safety. Starting with comparing between the two biggest areas. So we'll go Europe and then we're going to go the US. So, what's working? Let's start off with that. The pros. So, affirmative consent laws are very good, meaning yes means yes laws. This is only currently in two countries, like Sweden and Spain, but this has recently come out and it is very, very good. And the EU is starting to adopt it as well as Istanbul. They have the Istanbul Convention, which is a human rights treaty which is focused on preventing violence against women. Now, this is really amazing that Istanbul has actually started that, and now many EU countries are starting to adopt it. So these are the positives. We want to start on a positive note. And then we have street harassment laws, which I think is very, very common. I do not know one woman who hasn't had someone catcall them or had public harassment. The reality of that is just horrible. But there is one country, which is France, and it has criminalized catcalling and public harassment. So fines can be issued on the spot. So speaking about more of these laws is really good because then we can actually promote it and educate it in other countries. And another positive note is workplace protection. It's small, but it's starting, and that's the EU requires companies to prevent and address harassment at work. It is now legally in place. Okay, now the US. Now let me know if you're from the US here and if you have anything to add about these laws, whether it's good or bad. But we have the Title IX, which protects students from sexual harassment or assault in schools and universities. It's good, but this should be a normal right. We need this. We also have the Violence Act Against Women Act, which is VAWA, and it funds domestic violence shelters, legal support, and education. This is something that's rising, and it's something we also want to start to adopt in all countries, not just the US. And then one really good thing as well is the growing push for consistent education. So some states, not all, are beginning to require schools to teach what healthy boundaries and consent look like. They're starting this all the way from primary school. So that's a positive. Now we have the what's not good. And these are the grey zones. Well, no, these are deeper than the grey zones. But starting with Europe, in the EU, there is an outdate rape laws. So some countries still require proof of physical force for an act to be classified as rape. And as many women know, unfortunately, I know many women who've been raped, this is not always the case. We shouldn't have to need physical proof. There's also inconsistent enforcement, so there is no trauma-informed police, and that is often lacking. So when women do provide to the police of a situation that happens, oftentimes it's just swept under the rug. And then underreporting. Most assaults go unreported due to fear, shame, lack of trust in the system. Now, I think this is something that we can all agree on. That happens worldwide. Okay, so let's compare this to the cons of US. So, patchy state laws. Some states don't recognize marital rape or physical resistance. This is very, very bad. I know a number of people, I have a number of friends who have unfortunately been sexually abused or harassed on dates because many, many laws, not just the US, I'm from Australia myself. In Australia, if you go on a date with someone, that is considered consent. Not a good law, not something good in place. And then, including with the US, we have the backlog rape kits. So it is thousands of untested kits, delayed justice, and it actually re-traumatizes survivors. What this means is that if you want to have proof that something horrible has happened, they do a DNA swab test, but those actually don't go to the science faculties and it just stays in the, I don't know what to call it, but like the police locker and never actually goes through. So re-traumatizing the survivors. And then very, very simple, but very important, the inequality access to resources. In the US, but obviously in many countries as well, rural or low-income communities have limited victim support. Unfortunately, the most victim support goes to people who are in the medium to high income ratio. But one thing that I'm very, very passionate about that needs to be talked about more is these grey zones. And if you have any grey zones or anything to add, please let me know. But withdrawal consent midway, big grey zone. So many legal systems don't actually clearly define whether you can revoke consent during a sexual act. If someone has consent at the start, legally it can go all the way through, which is a very, very bad problem. There's also grey zones within guilt-based pressure, so giving consent under pressure, guilt, or manipulation is not legally recognized. If you give consent, but it was under guilt, under manipulation, it's still legally okay. And then we have a relation-based assault, which is when you're in a long-term relationship. It is often minimized or just diminished. And these relationships can be within families, can be a partner, and can be a friend as well. And then we have a growing problem, which isn't talked about enough, and it's tech abuse. So cyber talking, location tracking, stuff like air tags. And then there is sharing nudes or revenge porn, I think is it called. And these are not legalized or have any laws around it in most countries these days. And then there is the last one, which is very important, which many women struggle with. I work through with women a lot of the time, which is the freeze response. We have the fight, we have the flight, or we have moments where we freeze, where we're blank, we're numb, and we shut down. And so these people who go into these freeze moments, they don't really fight back. It looks like they're not really taking anything seriously, but according to the law, it's not real resistance, so it doesn't count. So that's kind of a little dive into what we're having with the laws. There are some good laws, but there's a lot of cons and there's a lot of grey zone. We're actually launching a few services soon where we're going to be able to help with tracking, help with communication. If anything happens to a woman, they can have a little dial which will alert authorities, or they can talk to someone for support as well. It's something that we're looking into the future because honestly, the thing that we need these days is speed.